Hello, everyone. Lucy Heavens here with another episode of CMO Therapy, a podcast that's hopefully going to help you navigate your way through your marketing journey. Because let me tell you, I get it. Being a marketing leader is no walk in the park. In each episode, we dive headfirst into the world of marketing, where uncertainty, tight budgets, and fierce competition are just the beginning of the roller coaster ride. But guess what? You are not alone in this journey. Why go solo when you can tap into the powerhouse of insights from some of the most awesome marketing leaders in the game? And look, the title might include the word therapy, but we are not just talking about challenges here. We are tackling them head on. Join us as we deep dive into the nitty gritty, share war stories, and unlock secret strategies. And get ready for no holds barred conversations because sometimes I have no filter. So if you are a chief marketing officer, a marketing lead, or someone just looking to up their marketing game, then I am so glad that you are here with us today. And I'm very, very glad to have with me the very awesome Conor. Conor, would you like to give a little bit of an introduction for the audience?
Sure, and I'm delighted to be here, and I can't wait to get go deeper into today's topic, full stop, and actually have that informal, candid chat that we all are very familiar with, very polished experiences. So hopefully this will be, getting into the weeds, talking about the reality. For those of you who don't know who I am, which is fair enough, I am a CMO three times over. General manager, founder, quasi former politician. We could go on for a while. And if you're really bored, listeners, go and look up a vanity website called conorcoughlan.com, and it'll tell you what I've been doing for the last 30 years.
Amazing. Thank you. I did not know the politician bit about you. We've
Yeah,
known each other for a while. That was news.
there's quite a few things, and I've run a bunch of NGOs as well.
Right. Okay. This is going to be interesting. Okay. So the title that we chose for this podcast is Beyond the CV, Identifying Real Marketing Talent in an AI driven World. And that was because we had a lovely little chat, one of our catch ups, and we were talking about the slightly painful reality of hiring marketing talent. Because yeah, building a kind of a high performance team is hard enough, but especially finding the right people can sometimes feel kind of like a little bit of a bit of a minefield, right? Everybody looks very polished on paper, and even more polished now that we have AI helping people to apply for lots of different roles and making everything they do sound absolutely incredible. It's just really getting much harder, isn't it, to kind of tell genuinely, the genuinely brilliant people, and then who's just kind of, looking very good on paper. So today, that's what we are going to be unpacking, to try and cut through the noise, hire people who can actually do the job. Sounds harsh, but yeah, that's what we're looking for. Okay, so let's get into it then. And to start off, just with sort of a bit of a broad, like introduction, why does marketing talent feel so much harder now? Finding marketing talent or hiring marketing talent feels so much harder now than it did years ago.
I wonder if we talk to our peers from the past, would they say it was so easy? But I do think it was, right? And maybe a bit of color to your listeners. I'm currently stacking a SaaS company, so I'm rebuilding a marketing org and their GTM actual division at the moment. And I'm living and breathing the pain that many of you are as you field your way through endless resumes, and you are looking at the pipeline you're getting, and you are trying to unpick out of the pipeline, the talent, etc. But just to your point, why now? What's changed? Well, AI tools are here. They're amazing in so many ways, but my God, they can put lipstick on a pig, and they can literally, transform a CV in seconds. And we all know the tools. I'm not going to mention a bunch of them, but you say, here's the JD, here's my resume or CV, please make them sound aligned. If you're in the States, please rig it so that it goes through the ATS systems, and you end up getting onto the interview circuit, or something akin to that. Now, it's really problematic, and I'll give an example a bit more. I have just filled 5 roles. I have another 10 to go on the marketing side. For those five, we had circa 9,200 applications, something a lot.
Stop.
Yeah, it was huge. But 92% of it was slop. and not useful. And that has a problem, right? You're drowning talent teams in a tsunami of applications. And then you're also overwhelming your interviewers if you don't screen. And I know we're going to come on to practical solutions, but that's why things have changed. Plus, we're all familiar. A lot of the applications these days are just one click in, and you can submit. Well, one click for what? If that's all it takes, then people will just click, click, click. And that's a problem. And we could have a whole other chat about rogue nations, bad actors, and how not to hire, fake North Korean employees, because that's another issue if you're in SaaS. But leaving that aside, let's just stick to the marketers.
So is it a volume thing then, or is it just that it's the kind of the problem, or the bit that makes it so much harder is now the kind of just the too much fluff being put on it? Is that what it is? Because I mean that kind of, yeah, that bad actor, let's call it that, wouldn't have presented themselves years ago as a bad actor. They still would have, hidden behind some sort of fluff. But yeah, I don't.
It's almost historically, I mean, not to age myself, but well, I don't know why I'm dodging around this. I'm absolutely Generation X. But if you want, when I think back to my career, starting out in the obviously before the 2000s, but anyway, you wouldn't apply for a role if you didn't have the experience. You wouldn't apply if you didn't have the qualifications or you didn't have certainly even the references to be able to go forward. It just didn't happen so much. And then also, you might have had variations of a resume or CV, but you didn't have hundreds of variations. And I think because the tooling now does it for you, people think, oh, it's fine. If the tooling, clones me into a quasi imposter and moves me, 5 swim lanes over, it's not a problem because it did it. I just don't think we did it in the past. And I'm being very polite to say perhaps people are stretching the truth, or other words, a bit more now than they ever did before.
That's so interesting. And the emotional, not emotional, what's the word? The psychological side of it just really absolutely fascinates me. But I think you've hit on something really big there. It's more the fact that it's because someone else has done it. In the past, you remember we were always told, weren't we, when you're going for a role, make sure that you personalize your CV. You should never be kind of sending, one sort of CV out to everybody. You should always be personalizing it for the role that you're applying for. And I think a lot of people actually didn't, whereas now everybody does, but they're doing it because it's being done for them, or like they've got a tool to do it for them. But then does that mean then that they almost separate themselves and think, well, that's not my responsibility then because ChatGPT's done it for me, therefore it's not my fault. Like,
Yeah, I definitely think there is, if we use fluffier words, an abdication of responsibility of what's getting submitted, right?
yeah.
Because a tool is doing it. I'll go a level further though, and certainly, I mean, I'm seeing it every day. People genuinely are applying for roles they're absolutely categorically not qualified for and don't have the experience. And that makes the process extremely difficult on all sides. And I know some people might think, well, I gave it a shot, I submitted in, but actually what's happening in behind the scenes is it's slowing things down. It's probably getting in the way of true talent from meeting through opportunities, and it's creating problems. It creates a lot of friction in the process.
So you've got this pile of 1,000 CVs in front of you then for this particular role. And even the those are the ones that you've kind of, you've done the first kind of filter. And you've got rid of the cheeky people that have applied like blatantly not with the skill set to do the role. So you've got this pile of 1,000 CVs, look really, really polished. How can you actually then, what's the next level under that of really separating the good ones from just the varnished ones, the polished ones?
And for clarity, for those listening or watching, I go out of my way when candidates are certainly sent to me pipeline wise to read your covering letter, to look at your resume. Then I also go and check your LinkedIn to make sure they marry, and you'd be surprised how many do not align. But that's another issue. I would add this in before how do you validate what you've got? What you need to do at the very beginning is make sure it isn't a one-click process. So whether you're using Indeed.com or LinkedIn or whatever platform you're using to advertise on, you have to make sure it's not one click. So getting the first basics in there are you're going to add in additional supplemental questions that are going to ask a question minimum of how many years experience do you have in this? Can you do that? Can you tell us examples of something? Something that is qualitative and something that requires them to pause, and that an AI tool ideally won't populate automatically, although they are now at that stage. But you do need to ask questions that are a little bit more. I mean, we can talk about what kind of questions, but then when they've gotten through that process, it really comes down to, okay, can you see what alignment there is? I suppose, what have we done? We've extended the interview process. So normally I like to keep things quite tight. You really only should need the line manager and a few others in play, but no, actually. So our talent team are out talking to people very early. They're having conversations. They're not having the usual conversations. They're probing. Do you really have experience in this? Have you done that? Can you give us examples of where you've done this? And there's been quite a lot of, can you supply some sample work, or can you do an exercise, particularly basic exercise? Like, give an example, if you're going to be undertaking a demand generation role, then there's a level of basic math that you should have. You should be able to understand a pipeline, funnel, etc. But yet, when we've gone and asked people to do that, they couldn't or
But
wouldn't.
even at that kind of like screening, that very early on stage, then that's
Yeah,
what
they
you.
would they wouldn't, or it quickly tells you who has applied that can't do the role. We're not
Mm,
talking about doing free work, and I've never been someone who believes in that, leverage the employee system for research or anything. That's not at all what we were doing. We were saying, give us an example of anything. Or here's an example of a pipeline. What can you tell us about it? Very basic. I mean, most of your listeners would be like surprised. I'm not talking about rocket science. We'd be like, okay, you know, tell us which of these is an MQL. Here's your funnel. Is this funnel looking, good, bad, or indifferent? And I'm not talking rocket science. I'm talking basics. And the most simplest thing you would probably do these days is put it into an AI tool and get it to give you your answers. They didn't even do that. They weren't willing to entertain. It was like, oh, I'm not going to do that because I actually don't have any experience in it.
okay, good. Ah, okay, that's interesting. Okay, so yeah, that's the step that I think then a lot of people are missing, which is why they're getting so many just very nice polished CVs and everything. It's actually just going down one level first. But that, yeah, because I think normally the kind of a homework assignment, or whatever the sort of little test, is normally done kind of much later on in the stage, isn't it?
I agree. It's normally done when you're considering between a few candidates or you're shortlisting, but now you're having to say upfront, can you actually even articulate this area? Because your resume is beautiful. I'm sorry for those of you listening. I keep on saying resume because I'm based in the States. I've been in here for a while now, but a resume, CV, whatever we want to use. But they look amazing and they can be so perfectly aligned. But actually, when you go and do a bit of probing, and I will say the minimum is this: resume to LinkedIn. Oh, completely different job titles, completely different roles, not updated because they've, been submitting hundreds of variations that actually sometimes LinkedIn is the one you've got to go back to and say, oh, that looks like what you actually do versus what you've told us you do.
Do you know what though? I'm thinking about this now from like sort of even years ago. That really hasn't sort of changed much. I mean, there was plenty of interviews I think I remember doing, back before we had access to these AI tools, where people would say on their CV, I've done, yes, I've done email marketing, for example. And then when you actually when you had the person sitting in front of you, and we're actually asking them questions, what they actually meant was, I worked with another team in the business that used to do the email marketing, and I just used to kind of request an email, or something like that. I've never actually kind of created and used a marketing automation system. And yeah, you had to sort of really dig into that kind of one line on their CV that they've said, yes, I can do email marketing. So it's no different really.
No, no, I agree entirely. I suppose another thing that I've seen a lot of, which is probably happening more now than ever before, is, uh, and I'm not a believer in tenure determines skill and capability, but there's a lot of people who are, let's say, less advanced in their career applying for very high level roles where they claim to have, strategic experience, and yet you dig in and there's none. And you're
Yeah.
like, oh, so actually, no, you've been executing or operating someone's strategy or plan, but
Yeah.
actually you're espousing to being the strategic lead. And it's not impossible, but I will say I have had people who are applying for roles where they should have 10, 15 years experience and they've got four. And you're
Yeah.
like, you can't, it doesn't naturally align. And I know some listeners will be thinking, well, is that bias because is tenure what matters? And no, what matters is the experience and the skill. Do you have the skills? Have you learned them? Have you put them into practice? If yes, amazing. Let's go talk. If not, however, it's not something that happens overnight.
Yeah. Okay. Now that leads me into kind of the next thing that I really wanted to sort of dig into, which is how do you make sure that you're hiring for the actual job that you need done. So rather than kind of a wish list of everything, because I think this is something that I kind of see quite often where, we sort of yeah, we think that marketing operations has a remit or whatever. We do some kind of like research. We think that's what we need, and then you build out the kind of job description, and suddenly you realize that you're putting all of these different things into it. And it is just, yeah, a wish list of everything. But how would you, yeah, how do you make sure that you're hiring for exactly what you need?
And you know what's funny? I'll tell you steps that I do, but I even wonder myself, are they effective now given the AI tooling? So one is making your JD really, really clear. I know that sounds really basic, but make sure it's clear and make sure you're actually asking for the essential skills and experience you need. Not everything, you can't ask for everything under the sun. Stick to what you actually do need. And then I'm very specific in certain areas. So I'll give an example. This firm that I said I'm stacking for at the moment, it's a very hands-on set of roles. So there are senior roles, but they're not, the VP of strategy or ivory tower positions. They're positions for a rapidly scaling SaaS org. So you need to be able to roll up your sleeves, get stuff done, operate in the gray. Things are not very black and white. You need to be pretty agile, etc. So the wording for that is in there. It is like this is you will have to, it literally says in the roles, you will have to roll up your sleeves. You will have to be both player and coach. You will have to execute and be able to look at strategy. And it's very clear to me that if I was reading that and I was someone else, let's say, who was looking for more a strategic role, perhaps in a matrix organization, I would not apply. However, I now think that even with those clarity of JDs, it doesn't matter. The AI tooling is still going to tailor you and people are still going to apply.
Yeah, I like the job descriptions where they have at the top a kind of this role exists because we saw this gap. We realized that we don't have this kind of competency or this skill set within our the team, and that's why it's kind of available. And then obviously the next bit being, and this is kind of what we want this person or this role to do, to achieve. That part to me of the job description like almost tells me more than the list of kind of tasks and things underneath, right?
No, exactly. At least that's telling you what the measures for success will be and also where you're going to fit in. And I would say there is a challenge, which is all of GTM is evolving right now at a rapid pace. And I think every role, also the irony of us saying about, about disparaging AI from an application process, but the reality is you need to be able to use AI and you need to be able to develop tooling that's going to allow you to be more effective and to be high performing. And like that ultimately is the need these days. So we are all kind of doing finger in the air and saying, okay, it's this role with this clarity, this scope and remit, but also keep in mind AI is here and you better do something more because we're going to need to add new tools, workflows, agents, etc. But that's a whole other conversation about where are we actually going as opposed to how do you get people in the door.
Hi there, quick breather while your brain connects the dots. If you're enjoying CMO therapy, please hit that follow button and leave a cheeky little rating. 5 stars if you're feeling generous, or 4 if you're British and emotionally reserved. Either way, it helps more than you think. Right, let's crack on. Yeah, yeah. Do you have any little tips on, so you have someone sitting in front of you and you really want to unpack what they're actually sort of saying on their CV that they can do? How would you, yeah, there any sort of tips on sort of questions that you've had that you find like really useful that actually gets down to the detail?
You know, what's funny is kind of almost is a bit of the reverse. And I'm always surprised at how many people don't do this, but I understand why, particularly in fast-paced industries. And sorry for your listeners, I'm currently in cyber. Cyber is like 24/7. It's like a military machine, to be frank. But it's sorry, I've got a lovely scam call. It tells me coming through for your listeners, so I won't be answering that anyway. But is a lot of people don't actually do reference checks. I'm always surprised at this, particularly when it comes to certain roles. They do a little bit of skirting or they assume, but actually they don't reach out to past line managers or just past employees. It's unusual, I find, but I've seen a lot of it. Now, maybe, as I said, it's because I'm in some very fast paced industries and people are very keen to stack and move on. But actually going back and checking, just generally, and I know there's, compliance and legal criteria these days, but sounding out through your network, an individual and their suitability and their, fit, because I know we're gonna talk about cultural fit in a moment, but it's an issue. So if you don't do that, don't be surprised if someone doesn't work out. Also, a kind of a hangover from well, we could debate if we're still in a pandemic or not, but from our core COVID times, a lot of people are still hiring without meeting face to face. And for certain senior roles, I always go and meet someone face to face because you can tell in seconds whether or not you're going to gel with them or whether they're going to gel with your team. You can't do that over Zoom, etc. It just doesn't. It's not the same. And if you really have significant roles, you need to make time to meet them. And again, fast-paced industries, people are saying, "Oh, I don't want to do that. I don't have the time." You better make the time because it really has a
Yeah.
big issue. But to your point, are there any, let's say, tips or tricks? One, as I said, is that validation of having to do an exercise if you need it for the role. And for clarity, there's loads of roles where people's skills are universal and they don't need to go through, a significant exercise to demonstrate that they've got the prowess. But you do need to say, like, here's an example, walk me through. I've certainly moved off, talk to me about your entire career, etc. It is all down to practical, evidential conversations. Walk me through what did you do when this happened? How would you solve for this? And here's a challenge, that exists. How would you tackle it, etc. And you do, unfortunately, for some areas, have to go under the hoods. And for my fellow CMOs that might be listening, we are wearing so many hats, but we are one of the few people left who've probably done it all. So you've done systems, you've done data analysis, you've done field, you've done proposition, you've done all the variations, or at least you know what they're meant to do. So you have to probe and ask, because a lot of people these days don't know what to expect from those roles. Anyway, the less I would say tips and tricks, it's more you're going to have to dig a bit deeper and go evidential. And then absolutely do your reference checks because people forget. And I'm telling you, I have, by the grace of God, having done some, I mean, not done some, I do them, discovered some, let's say, misses, as in we really looked out by not hiring certain people because doing the due diligence surfaced issues that they wouldn't have fitted at all.
Yeah. I love that. And I'm glad you didn't say anything there that, that wasn't, that we haven't kind of sort of already been doing. And I don't mean that came out wrong actually, but what I mean is the good old question of going back to tell me when, tell me an example, like give me an actual physical time when you did this. And it's always quite funny, I think, with those interview questions, because sometimes you do get those people that when they're answering you with answering a question, they're answering like as if you're reading out of a kind of a textbook or something like that. This is the way that the world should be and this is how I would tackle that problem. Okay, that's interesting. But tell me about a time when that's actually happened to you in an organization, and suddenly you see that person almost like then come alive when they're actually kind of telling the story about where it happened to them. And I've even had a couple of times where um, then they've let slip whilst telling that story accidentally about things, other things that have happened, or maybe even where they've like messed up. Sorry, I nearly swore then, but yeah, where they've kind of like messed up with something. But actually, yeah, I find the kind of storytelling is a better way to get things out of people.
Oh, I agree entirely. And to be frank, I also want to hear when people have, if we put the positive spin, where they've undertaken an exercise of innovation and it hasn't gone the way planned because it's a lesson
100%.
learned.
Yeah.
But you're giving me, I won't mention names, and I won't mention where, although it's not too long ago. You do need to watch out, and you've hit the nail on the head, which is in this era of AI, there's a lot of people ingesting, marketing for dummies, etc., into LMs, and then they're churning them out the other end. So I have met and interviewed a lot of people who have got beautiful, verbose marketing vernacular. The lexicons are amazing, but they haven't got a clue what any of it means. And they can tell you, almost like a management consultant, oh, yes, of course, this is what it should look like. But when you do go deeper and go, well, no, no, tell me how it's worked for you. Like, how have you done this? Or you've mentioned XYZ, but actually, what was that like on the ground? And they have no clue. And you're like,
Mm.
oh, you're able to cite back to me academically what we're supposed to do, but you can't actually walk me through any practical examples. And that's usually your instant red flag that something's not right.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And you can have a conversation around it because the thing about marketing as well is there isn't always, it's not black and white, right? There's always that gray in the middle. It really depends on, who your market is, who you're going after, what budget you've got. Just there's so many different things. So I think, yeah, just having that example, at least then you can start a conversation with them. But even then, you could kind of go theoretical. You could say, okay, well, that's interesting that you've answered it that way. If you was to have, double the budget, like what would you do differently? And you can really start to kind of unpack. So yeah, I think that's a really good point. Um, just moving on to, oh, I hate this. I hate the topic in a way of cultural fit. There's something about that phrase. I've got a few phrases, those like corporate phrases that just send shivers down my spine, and cultural fit is kind of one of them. I read somewhere this article that said that actually you shouldn't be hiring someone for a cultural fit. You should be hiring for like them to challenge your culture and like kind of add something different, which I thought was quite interesting. But what does it mean to you when you're hiring? How are you looking for, how do you bring culture into it?
Yeah, it's a tricky one, and you're giving me echoes of Matrix Land, right? And the other thing that always triggers me is when someone says, "Let's have a skip level meeting," and I'm like, "Oh wow, you're from the bell curve." I'm like, "Let's talk about that world. That's a world in itself." Sorry to your listeners. There's probably a few of you that are in Matrix conglomerates, but anyway, thankfully I'm not. But yeah, I mean, okay, I suppose I would say this. If you pause on the broader issue of culture or corporate culture, etc., because there are so many variants of that, and depending on age and stage, some firms that is mission critical. I mean, I could go into variations of firms where it's a particular persona, a particular psychological profile they're looking for, and all that. But that's not generally how I work at all. When I think of culture and fit, I'm thinking more about the team, how they're going to gel in the team. And particularly if you're building a high performing team, how do you maintain that? And a lot of that maintenance is through positivity, gusto, attitude, with, willingness to learn, to engage. And also, how are they going to engage across GTM? I know everyone who's listening will have all heard and lived and participated in the stories of friction across go-to-market between different teams. We're not going there because that was a rabbit hole for so many. But
There's a few of my podcasts about that.
of course, I mean it's there, and traditionally there is friction. I'm lucky that both now and in the last two roles before I've managed to kind of solve that, but that's a different story. But so what is cultural fit? Well, it's this, like, we've all lived this and we've all been there. You can have, and apologies to your listeners saying this, right, because it's probably dumbing it down a bit much, but you can have a bad egg or a rotten apple can really destroy everything. And it can really bring down your overall performance. And we've all been there. I've been at so many organizations in my career where there's been one or two bad eggs in the team and a whole tsunami of stuff comes from it. There's fires, there's problems, there's challenges. There's also resentment, people resenting those who are perhaps, it's the wrong use of words, but I think back, there's a few who were willfully underperforming, let alone underperforming. And you get resentment like, why am I doing the hours and busting my ass to do XYZ when they are not doing this, or they're not delivering, but no one's holding them accountable? Or very often what happens is they're not delivering and I'm doing their work. So you get that kind of level of interaction happening. And that's a side of, trying to make sure that you keep a healthy, positive environment. And I'm sorry to use the word, but it is an issue. Trying to prevent or limit toxicity in your org or across your business. So that's when I think of cultural fit. It's like, okay, what's the fit, or what's the culture in essence you need to have a high performing team? And to be clear, talent, like, if anyone's listening and they're of this belief, and I hope they're not, that talented people are not challenging, that is so untrue. Like, you expect to be challenged. I expect highly talented people to be quirky. I mean, an absolute nerd myself and quirky beyond belief. I expect you to have your uniqueness. I just don't want you to come in and destroy the environment or burn the house down. So it's really about getting that right mix. And in my case, certainly where I am now, in mainly scaling SaaS orgs, it's getting people in with that can-do attitude, getting people in with the willingness to learn and grow. And I would echo this. I probably very often, if I am down to two or three candidates and they've got the same skills or experience, it's the will. Are they willing to do the work and willing to learn and grow, versus do they have the skill to do it? I'll take aptitude, you could say, over experience a lot of the time, unless it is very, very essential to the role. But sorry, this is slightly divergent. You asked about culture. To me, it's the right people with the right attitude coming together who are going to gel and make magic happen. It's not a walk in the park, and will you have to, every day manage the team and make sure that things are working ideally harmoniously? Yes, you will. But I think the key is avoid people who just inherently are going to clash or are just not a fit for you.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And yeah, I mean, two of my favorite words, or what I'm looking for all the time in people, I always have done like this with my teams, building my teams, is grit and curiosity. For me, those two things like absolutely smash most other things. I mean, okay, there's some skill sets for some particular roles that you kind of absolutely have to have. But yeah, I would take someone with uber amounts of grit and curiosity any day.
Absolutely, and people overlook it, I think, so often and think, okay, now some of your listeners are going to be like, wait a minute, didn't we start this conversation saying about having the skills, experience, etc., the criteria to do the role, and now we're saying we'll make allowances, and the answer is we will, as long as you've got the core. Can you
Yeah.
do the core ability and capability and requirements of the role? Sure, but its willingness and a can-do attitude really, really makes a difference.
So I want to kind of bring us back in like almost a bit of a full circle then, because there's two sides of the coin with kind of the use of AI. Like we started off talking about people, candidates using AI, for their CVs, for, some of the kind of homework assignments, anything to kind of really support them to get the role. How about using AI for during the recruitment process yourself? Like how are you using it?
Well, it's a good question. And now it depends on which firm, right? So as I said, for the latest experience, it's limited. The team are not using it. They're using, I don't know how familiar it is outside of America, but automatic talent selection programs are pretty common. So ATS over here. And it's that process of scanning your resume, looking at your experience, checking across your network and seeing do you meet fundamental criteria. That's done pretty automated. You could say almost on a quasi soulless basis that happens. However, the tooling now negates it. It's broken. That model no longer works. You can override what originally they were designed for. But what we're doing probably slightly different is when you're here, all the roles for optimizing your onboarding, optimizing getting you ramped, having dedicated MBOs, they're all tailored to AI tooling, etc. But I wouldn't say we're actually using so much in the actual process. It's that initial screen, and then it's the due diligence. And yeah, the portals have improved. So when you're getting your details confirmed to the talent team and when you're putting in your, let's call it your personal identifiable information, that's all improved dramatically. But we're not really doing anything during the actual process itself. It's not there. I'd be keen to hear from others who are. I imagine you could actually deploy live into the actual process tooling and see what it does. I should flag, of course, we're taking transcripts of conversations and all of them are being recorded. I mean, that's just a given. But
Yeah.
we're not doing anything beyond that. I mean, I'm sure, as I said, you probably could have, an AI tool interacting, doing something live. I do know this, and some of your listeners may have done it. I've had to do it. I've had to have the initial conversations with firms with the AI bot. You don't talk to a human, you talk to a glorified, well, actually, not even an avatar. You talk into a glorified Zoom session, effectively. I won't say which orgs, but they're in the FANG family. And that's the first part of you being screened as either an advisor or a consultant is
Wow.
AI will talk to you, and then they will determine whether or not someone will actually talk to you afterwards.
That's amazing. I can't imagine that. How about using AI as part of the kind of interview process? I think like when we spoke before, I mentioned to you there's a head of content and she was telling me she was hiring for a content executive, and she actually built that into like the homework assignment where she asked the content person to the candidate to use AI to write an article about a particular topic, and a brief was given. But actually, what she was looking for, they had to show they're working out, show the prompts that they used to write that article. And it wasn't so much the output that she was kind of really testing for; it was actually the kind of method of prompting. And it was so interesting talking to her and how she explained with these sort of candidates, like the different sort of how much you learn about a person basically from sort of the prompts that they're writing. But yeah, have you come across anything like that?
Well, I think that was genius, which was to look at what prompting were they using to get the output full stop. I mean, I'll put a variation. We have just filled the head of an AI labs unit, so they had to be tested to quite a
Wow.
level. But that's,
Yeah.
that's pretty essential. I can't say I mean, the closest I've seen to that is in the comm space. We were talking about some silver crises and saying, okay, if this was to happen to the firm, what would your strategy and framework be? And yeah, of course, they used a learning model and went through it. But I was probably more focused on the experience they had. So they were like, well, at this firm, this happened and this happened, and this is how we did it. So we are like, okay. But no, I haven't used so much of it. Like, for example, just placed Martech leader, just placed a head of demand gen. I didn't ask either of them to say, hey, go and build me a widget and walk me through, how you would do it.
Mm.
But you're giving me food for thought.
Yeah, same here
There is a
actually
way.
as well. Yeah, my goodness. Yeah, like building out a kind of an agent that would, I don't know, do some, kind of tone of voice or something like that. I don't know, but yeah, it's a really good idea actually. Thank you for that.
Thank you. It was your
Yeah,
idea.
right. I'm going to have to wrap it up now, but oh my goodness, I could have spoken a lot longer on this topic. There was a lot to cover, and we covered a lot. So thank you very much. I really appreciate it, and yeah, I'm sure the audience are all saying thank you as well for all of those really great tips.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you to your listeners. Hopefully, you weren't too bored and you can take something away from it. If
Not
nothing,
at all.
finish
Enjoy
up
the
your
rest of your
coffee.
day.